Daniel Jones, he doesn't strike me as the guy that is going to raise like this big stink and demand like the Deshaun Watson guaranteed number. Like he seems like a very like reasonable like fellow. He's got the aesthetics of like a PwC summer intern or something. Like you'd be like, no, you look at the numbers here. Like I'm worth $20 million a year. Like let's call fair here. So.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Monkey Knife Fight's NFL Divisional Round Preview Show. I'm Dan Watkins. Joining me from Rotowire.com, Nick Whalen and John McKechnie, both you guys riding high for different reasons coming into this week. Nick, your Jags, an epic comeback last weekend. John, your Dogs, back-to-back. John, we'll start with you. How was round two of the victory lap and the tour of the nation? How's that going?
It was ridiculous. I mean, we got seats like on the TCU side, and when TCU scored their touchdown, it was loud in there. Like there was really good representation from the Horned Frog faithful. I caught some of these on my way out to LA and everything, but things settled in. The rain continued and caused a lot of people to fall over on the concourses there, but on the field, the Dogs dominated. It was great to see. It was a lot more stress-free than last year's experience in Indianapolis. So I was happy about that, and just a good time overall. I wish the weather cooperated a little bit better, but beyond that, no complaints. I'm feeling pretty good. I can like sense the villain like seeping in as like Georgia now wins 2 in a row, and it's like I kind of want a third one now. It's like I got to check myself. They went 40 years without one, so just be happy with what you got.
Absolutely. Did the TCU fans, did they last the entire game, or was there a point where they made like the mass exodus?
Well, they caused a big problem for me because I got hungry, and they all just left for the concession stand. So like all the lines for food for the edamame stand or whatever they have at SoFi Stadium just packed with Frogs people. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to stand in line there and just have awkward small talk. So I had to eschew that and had to get dinner at 11 o'clock local time whenever we walked over to an establishment through the driving rain of Los Angeles. It was so that I do have a bone to pick with them for that one.
Very good. Nick, the Jags, man, did you shut it off at any point? Did you switch this channel at any point, maybe at halftime? Did someone have to remind you to go back to that game, or were you there the entire time?
Well, I made what was an initial mistake of having some over to watch the game. I had to be on my best behavior. I had to keep myself composed. At one point I did kind of walk out the front door or a little lap around the front yard, come back in to compose myself. But no, never turned it off at any point. For a while there, I was thinking, is Trevor Lawrence going to set the single game interception record? I kind of talked myself into trying to find a moral victory in the second half, possibly be as bad as it was early on. I hope this isn't something that carries over into next season. Like went through the whole progress process, the bargaining process, all of that. The Jags to come storming back after being down to nothing. Obviously at no point expect the Jags to win the game. I was hoping that they would make it semi-competitive and make it a fun watch in the second half.
In my opinion, this is the best weekend of football on the calendar every year, the divisional round. Let's get right to the games, guys. Nick, let's start off. Your Jacksonville Jaguars heading to Kansas City. They get the freshly rested Kansas City Chiefs on a Saturday, but Trevor Lawrence has never lost on a Saturday. How are you feeling about your Jags heading into this one?
Yeah, everybody's seen the stat on Lawrence by now. I think if you go all the way back to pick up football in the driveway, he's never, in fact, lost any games on Saturday. They keep giving the Jags these Saturday games every week, and they keep testing fate with it. So hopefully we go 3 for 3 after getting both Tennessee. Then, of course, last week, the Chargers on a Saturday. Look, I'd be lying if I said I feel great about the Jaguars' chances to win outright. I think they could at least give the Chiefs a game, though. Kansas City has only covered 2 of its last 8 games. They've struggled against these big numbers all season. We know the Chiefs are the better team. They're coming off of a bye. We know the numbers with Kansas City coming off of a bye. But at the same time, the Jaguars got off to one of the worst starts in NFL history last week. And I didn't think they played all that well in Week 18 against Tennessee. I think they were lucky to escape that game and even make the playoffs. So in some ways, I feel like they are due to finally play well for an entire game, something they really haven't done in a while. And what it comes down to with Kansas City is if you're going to beat the Chiefs, you need to play a great game. You also need the Chiefs to play a well below average game. Chances of that happening, not great, but I do think we see some points. We got a high total here. I think both teams are going to be able to move the ball, but at the end of the day, I just can't do it. I can't take the Jags to beat the Chiefs straight up.
John, any concern about the weather in this one? It might be a little messy, a little wintry mix in Kansas City. You got the Jags coming from Florida for this one. Any concerns about the weather here?
Well,
go ahead, John.
It cuts both ways because, but by and large, most of these players are from warm weather states just by nature. But obviously the Chiefs players a little bit more seasoned towards it. But, if it takes the air out of the offense on both sides, I would say that largely favors the Jaguars. I think that they have, obviously a better running back situation with Travis Etienne, but Pacheco, I feel like, has been underutilized of late, and he could be someone that kind of sneaks up on the Jaguars in a sense because he's a good between the tackles guy, physical runner, not the most pleasant guy to bring down.
All right, Nick, let's get right to the numbers in the contest here on MKF. Trevor Lawrence, 255.5 passing yards. This is more or less. He's thrown for 256 in 9 of 18 games this year, including 259 against Kansas City earlier. He had 288 last week against the Chargers. What do you see? What do we see out of Trevor Lawrence?
Well, I'll say this. If you think the Jags are going to hang around and give Kansas City a run in this game, I think you got to go more on this number for Trevor Lawrence. He was at 288 last week, 318 against Dallas, and that come from behind win in the regular season, 368 the week before that against Tennessee. Those were games where Jacksonville started slow, crept their way back into the game, had to throw their way back into the game. And look, if you think Jacksonville's going to hang around and make this competitive, they're probably not going to do it on the ground. I think you can run on Kansas City, but it can't be your primary weapon, and you're going to have to keep up with a Chiefs team that is likely going to score, 27 plus at the bare minimum on this Jags team. So while the Jags would like to control the ball, control the clock, I don't know that they're going to be able to do that. I think they're going to have to throw the ball. It won't be as severe as last week where they essentially had to get away from the run when you're down 27-0. But if they're going to keep up with Kansas City, they're going to have to throw the ball. That means I think more on this number for Trevor Lawrence.
Any concern that he might have poked the bear heading into this one? He said he couldn't imagine Arrowhead being any louder than it was in Jacksonville last Saturday night.
I think some of those type of comments get a little bit blown out of proportion. I think he meant that more as a compliment to Duval Nation, which really did show up, man. I can't even tell you how many times I've watched the highlight of the 4th and 1 play, the power T, ETN getting around the corner. You can just hear the roar of the crowd as it becomes clear, he's going to get them into field goal range. The place was rocking. It is what it is. And look, I don't know. Does it make you cheer 2% louder because Trevor Lawrence said that during the week? No, I don't think so. It's going to be a hostile environment no matter what. But to me, I thought that was a totally innocuous comment.
John, Patrick Mahomes, 315.5 passing yards is his more or less. He's hit the more on this number in 10 of 17 games, including 331 yards against Jacksonville back in November. The Jags, they ranked 28th against the pass in the regular season, but they did hold Justin Herbert to 273 last week. And it's not like the Chargers started running the ball in the second half. So Herbert was still slinging it even up big late in that game.
Right. So I feel like that I've obviously paid more attention to the Jags later in the season as they became, viable playoff candidates and everything. And I don't feel like they have a bad secondary by any means. You need kind of a great secondary and an amazing game plan, of course, to slow down Patrick Mahomes. But 315 strikes me as a smidge high. I could see him challenging for 300, but I'm going to take the less on Mahomes here.
All right, Nick.
Man, I mean, I kind of have to put my rooting interest aside here. I think the Chiefs could probably get this done without Mahomes having a huge game. With that said, I think this is a very exploitable Jacksonville secondary, and they've been particularly bad against the tight end position. And I know we'll get to Travis Kelce at some point, but, if you think Travis Kelce's having a big day, there's only going to be one guy throwing him the ball, and that's Patrick Mahomes. So I'm actually inclined to go more here. I mean, we've seen this total creep up all week. It's up over 50 now. I think the belief is that both teams are going to be able to move the ball. And look, if you can kind of look at it both ways. Like if the Jags have to keep up with the Chiefs, Lawrence, you could view that as a more. But if the Chiefs also have to keep scoring to stay ahead of the Jaguars, I think they keep their foot on the gas here. So I'll go more on Mahomes as well.
All right, Travis Etienne, 73.5 rushing yards is his more or less. He's reached 74 in 8 of 17 games this season. He's coming off a 100-yard game last week, ran for 109 against the Chargers. We know their run defense is terrible. Kansas City's is much better. They ranked 8th in the NFL in the regular season against the run, and they held him to 45 yards on 11 carries in their regular season matchup. Nick, more or less.
I got to go less here. I think this number is just a little bit too high. I think if it was in the 60s, maybe that makes it a little bit harder. I don't see ETN going more here unless he rips off a big one, and he's fully capable of doing that. He had a 61-yard touchdown against the Houston Texans late in the regular season. Like he is that type of player, but if he's just kind of nickel and diming this defense for 4 or 6 yard runs here and there, I don't see him getting over this number because I don't know that the volume is going to be there. I think the Jags are going to have to throw the ball. So to me, the safer play here is the less.
John?
I'm in agreement here. I feel like, ETN has a pretty unpredictable workload week to week, it seems like. And this game sets up to where the Jags might need to get away from the run a little bit. So, we could be in for ETN needing to clear this number on like 14 carries. And I'm not sure that he's going to be able to quite do that. Like Nick said, got the big playability, but I'm betting against it in this one.
All right, Travis Kelce, 81.5 receiving yards. He's had at least 82 yards in 8 games this season. Finished with 81 on the dot against the Jags in the regular season. But he has 6 straight playoff games with 95 or more yards. John, does that streak continue this weekend?
I think so. It wouldn't surprise me to see this number creep up on MKF because I got to figure that a lot of the wagering on this one is going to be on the more. I mean, Kelce is just the engine that makes that passing offense go. He's option A for Patrick Mahomes. Like you said, in the playoffs, it gets even more concentrated towards him, and there's no Tyreek Hill. The receivers are fine outside of him, but Travis Kelce is the guy. I think we're going to see him go into potentially 100 yards here.
Nick?
Yeah, I think this number is low. I was looking at an unnamed sports book earlier today, and it's actually at 79.5 there. So, maybe that is kind of the general market, but I'm with John. I think this is a really, really good spot for Travis Kelce. Obviously no Tyreek Hill anymore for Kansas City. And during the regular season, Kelce had his kind of splash games, but he's the number 1 tight end in fantasy. But towards the end of the year, kind of went on a streak where he was struggling to get into the end zone, struggling to put up those gaudy numbers. I think that changes this week. I mean, no team in the NFL has allowed more yardage to tight ends this season than the Jacksonville Jaguars. 93 catches to tight ends, over 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns on the season, yards per target, almost 10. So I think this is a fantastic spot on paper for Travis Kelce.
And any thoughts on the halftime show in Kansas City this week? It's going to be Little John. Yes, that's right. Noted Kansas City Chiefs fan. I'm kidding. He's an Atlanta Falcons fan, but he is playing the halftime show at Arrowhead. Any thoughts on that?
Well, they should have gotten Kansas City Rockers Puddle of Mud to do it. If you want to whip the Arrowhead faithful into a frenzy, you get some drift and die going, and the roof blows off. The non-existent roof blows off.
I think the problem with Puddle of Mud is that would appeal to the Jacksonville fans too much, so they didn't want to give them that.
Fair enough. And the field might actually be the Puddle of Mud this week in Kansas City.
Yeah, exactly. It was a safety concern.
All right,
Two on the nose.
Fair enough. All right, guys, how about a pick in this one? Kansas City favored by 8.5. I think this number might have even come down a little bit. Nick, can the Jags cover?
Yeah, it was at 9.5 at some books earlier this week, settled in at 8.5 pretty much across the board. The Jaguars can cover. They definitely can. I think it's kind of a 50-50, and that's the point of the spread after all. I'm going with Kansas City to cover this number. I know it's been risky. They have been better covering these bigger numbers as a favored team in the playoffs than they have during the regular season. We know the numbers with Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes coming off a bye. I think for some teams, there could be a rust argument. I don't really see that being the case with Kansas City. So I like the Chiefs to cover this. I don't think they blow the Jags out necessarily, but I think we get like a, 33-24 type of game.
John?
I am also on the Chiefs to cover this one. 8.5, I basically see the Chiefs winning this one, but by 10, I think it's going to be a fun game, but I think in the end, the Chiefs end up pulling away and the second half magic for the Jags, kind of runs out a little bit here.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you guys. Give me the Chiefs. I like Kansas City 34-20 final score. All right, Saturday night, we got that NFC East showdown, the Giants and the Eagles in Philly. Let's talk about Jalen Hurts, who is healthy, so he says, going into this one. John, his passing number is 245.5. It's his more or less. His fantasy points are 25.5. He hit this total in yardage 5 times this year. He didn't in either game against the Giants, though. The first game against the Giants, he ran for 77 yards and a touchdown, just 13 yards in the second game. But are the Giants going to go into this one maybe trying to force him to use his arm more than his legs?
I thought I know that the volume didn't end up piling up in that first matchup in the Meadowlands, but the Eagles really took it to the Giants in that one. I think that's the more informative game between the two of them because, week 18, they saw what was going on in Washington with the Cowboys, and they're like, we'll just kind of get out of here with the win, lock up the 1 seed. I do like Hurt. I wish that Hurts had a little bit longer of a runway of healthy games going into this matchup, but at the same time, figure he's fresh, rehabbed up and everything. So I'm going to take the more on this one. I don't know if the Giants corner personnel can really hang with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Goddard for a full 60.
Nick?
Yeah, I think we're getting a slight discount here just based on the injury and some of the general skepticism that's popped up with the Eagles late in the season. If Jalen Hurts is healthy, I think this is an easy more. It's still fair to question how much that shoulder is lingering. Like what I would like to know, he came out of week 18 and said, he still had some soreness. Like, is it throwing the ball or is it tucking and running and taking a hit to the shoulder that's actually affecting Jalen Hurts? Because if he's comfortable as a thrower, I think this is a fairly easy more. He was going over this number routinely when he was healthy and at his peak earlier this season. But it is tough because I feel like we don't have a great sample of him playing the Giants. And John, I know you mentioned, week 14, it was a domination by the Eagles, but I also feel like that was at the absolute peak of all the Giants injury issues. Like they came into that game injured. They came out of that game even more injured. And it feels to me like the Giants are kind of finding their stride again right now. And look, I think the Eagles are going to be fine. I like them to win this game, but I do understand it. Like you had an opportunity in week 18 to have your get right statement, remind everybody we're the best team in the NFC game. And technically you took care of business, but you only beat the Giants second stringers by 6 points. It was pretty underwhelming. So I kind of get some of the skepticism around the Eagles in this game. With that said, I'm going more on this number for Jalen Hurts. I think as long as he makes it through this game, he's going to get to 250.
All right. How about Daniel Jones? 218.5 passing yards, 48.5 rushing yards. He reached that passing number total in just 4 times this season. He did have 301 yards against Minnesota last week, 49 rushing yards in 7 of 17 games, 78 last week. He did it all against that terrible Vikings defense. The Eagles, though, they do have the number 1 passing D in the NFL. They allowed less than 180 yards per game. Nick, can he get to 219?
This is so tough because I feel like the Vikings defense has baited us into a very gettable number for Daniel Jones, but we have to keep in mind that 2 of his great games over the last few weeks came against the Vikings, and that defense got worse and worse as the season went along. Like you said, the Eagles have been the best pass defense in the league, essentially wire to wire. They played Daniel Jones really well in that week 14 game, and I feel like, is the book kind of out on Daniel Jones, the runner? Like, is it become too obvious? Like, our team's going to kind of sell out to stop that? So I'm really interested to see how Philly responds in that regard. I think I will go more on this passing number. It's more about the number just being a little bit lower. I don't necessarily think Daniel Jones has another explosive game, but to me, in a situation where they're likely trailing for a decent amount of the game, I think he can get to 220.
John?
This is really close. I'm going to go with less. I worry about just the lack of talent on the outside kind of catching up with the Giants as far as, their receiving personnel goes. Isaiah Hodgins has been a great story. I think that he can stick in the league, but Darius Slayton having the game that he did a week ago, I'm not sure that I see that. And he's going to need 2 guys to really, help carry or like push for 100 yards in this one for him to get there. And I'm betting against that. So I'm going to take the less.
Nick, if you're the Giants general manager, have you seen enough from Daniel Jones to offer him a contract? They did not pick up his 5th-year option going into next year. So do you give him a new contract?
Well, I think you kind of have to at this point. It's right on the borderline, and I think for better or for worse, the way that he played last week against Minnesota, that might have been the game that pushed it in favor of him getting a new contract. You kind of have to do the risk reward, right? So if you're not re-signing Daniel Jones, what's the other option? It's not like you have the number 2 pick in this draft and you can just take the quarterback of the future. It's like if you're not re-signing Daniel Jones, you're doing the bridge quarterback. You're probably going year to year. You could end up in the Colt zone where you're just bringing in somebody. You're hoping it hits, and eventually you kind of root for things to bottom out, and then you end up drafting a new quarterback, which could put you in the same spot, right? Like, it's no guarantee. Like just because you take a quarterback in the top 10 doesn't mean you're automatically set. I mean, the hit rate is basically 50-50. So, with Daniel Jones, like he's one of those quarterbacks that I think has proven already that he can succeed, but you have to have the right pieces around him. However, as John alluded to, Daniel Jones has had a really, really good year this year with one of the worst skill position groups in the league around him. I think the coaching around him, the scheme has been fantastic. But if you're the Giants, I think you can sell yourself on the idea of, okay, let's see if this guy's some real weapons on the outside, and then maybe he can get to another level.
John, what about you?
I think you do it. And you know what? Daniel Jones, he doesn't strike me as the guy that is going to raise like this big stink and demand like the Deshaun Watson guaranteed number. Like he seems like a very like reasonable like fellow. He's got the aesthetics of like a PwC summer intern or something. Like you'd be like, no, you look at the numbers here. Like I'm worth $20 million a year. Like let's call fair here. So like I don't think that he's going to have a potentially like cap crippling type of contract demand. I think that you're going to see him push for $100 million because that's the going rate for extending a young quarterback like that. But I think that if you're the Giants, go ahead and try to lean into it and get out of it without having to pay like $200 million guaranteed type of thing.
Yeah, I would too. I would absolutely lock up Daniel Dimes for the long term. But at the same time, if he does want to cause a stink and demand absurd amounts of money, I wouldn't be afraid to walk away from him either. Because I also think that Brian Daboll has the magic touch, and he can make just about any quarterback look pretty good with his system and the way he can just get the most out of them. So, guys, we have a couple skill position players here in this one. Let's just kind of fly through and do a little speed round here. A.J. Brown, Nick, 79.5 receiving yards, more or less.
I'm going more. 5 of the last 6 games in the regular season, A.J. Brown cruised to the more on this number. And keep in mind that he was battling kind of a nagging knee issue toward the end of the regular season. Didn't end up costing him any time, but I think he wasn't quite at 100%. I think the bye week should push him back closer to full health. So, he's going to see Adoree Jackson, who did a pretty good job on Justin Jefferson last week. That scares me a little bit, but I think this is a pretty favorable number for A.J. Brown. So I'll go more.
John, Miles Sanders, 65.5 rushing yards, more or less.
This one's tricky because, as Nick alluded to, how much are they going to want Jalen Hurts to run? But this is also the playoffs, and I think that Hurts is like their best rushing option. And I could see Sanders getting bottled up a little bit here. I'm not the biggest Miles Sanders guy in the world, so I'm going to take the less here.
All right, Nick. Saquon Barkley, 68.5 rushing yards, more or less.
Oh man, this is tough. I mean, he's been so good through the year the last few weeks as well. He obviously played well against Minnesota. I'm going to go less. I think this could be a game where, of course, you try to establish Saquon Barkley early on, but if he doesn't rip off a big one in the first half, I think this could be a pretty pass-heavy approach for the Giants over the final 2 quarters. So it really right on the line. Great job by Brian, of course, setting the line here, but I'm going to go less.
All right, John, we don't have a number for Isaiah Hodgins, but what do we see out of him?
I think that he gets to 64.5 would be my line, and I would take the more. I'm a Hodgins guy. What can I say? Go Beavs.
All right, very good. Philadelphia, they're favored by 7.5. John, are the Eagles moving on, and do they cover?
Eagles move on, but the Giants, they love a close game. So I think that they're going to keep it to a touchdown or less, and therefore they are going to cover the spread.
Nick?
Giants cover as well. Yeah, we do a staff picks article at Rotowire. We went 5 for 5. Everybody's on the Giants this week. Maybe that should scare you a little bit, but that number's just a little too high. I think it is, and I think the Eagles win. I'm with John, but I think they win by somewhere between 3 and 6.
All right, I'll go contrarian. Give me the Eagles. Give me the Eagles to cover too. I think too many people are falling in love with the Giants after a game against a very overrated Minnesota Vikings team. I think the Eagles roll. Eagles fly, if you will, in this one. Yeah. Moving on, Sunday, 2 great games, starting off with the Bengals at the Bills. Two great quarterbacks in this one, as we know. Joe Burrow, 275.5 passing yards is his more or less, Nick. He hit this number in 7 of 17 games, but just once in the last 5.
Yeah, the last 2 games against Baltimore, I thought the Ravens actually did a really good job defensively, about as well as they could have against that Cincinnati offense. So, not the greatest games to necessarily use as a sample. I feel like I'm going more on everything, but I kind of feel like I have to go here. I don't think the Bengals are going to be able to run the ball at all on Buffalo. I think this is going to be a very pass-happy approach. To me, it comes down to, can they protect Joe Burrow, right? If he's dropping back and he's getting sacked 4 or 5 times in this game, I don't think he's going to be able to settle in. I think that's going to kind of knock them off. And it's going to be really difficult for them to score with the Buffalo Bills. Down 3 starting offensive linemen. But if they could protect Joe Burrow, even at a reasonable rate, if he's sacked 3 or fewer times, I like Cincinnati to win this game. And obviously that means they're going to put up points. So I'll go more here. I think we should know better already. We're only in year 3 of Joe Burrow's career, but it feels like everybody's jumping off of Cincinnati with these O-line injuries. Not me. I think Cincinnati is going to be able to, at the very least, make this a very, very close game on the road.
John?
I go back and forth on this one. I think that the Bengals almost by necessity have to get the run going, and Joe Mixon can make a huge difference like he did against Carolina, where he ran all over them, and sometimes he can disappear when they need him. So I think either way, the Bengals are going to try to get the run going here, and I don't know if the Bills on the other side are going to be able to build the type of lead where the Bengals need to completely abandon the run. So I think that they're going to try to keep Burrow, or not have Burrow be the only thing working on this offense. So I'm going to take the less here. I think he challenges for it, but I think we're going to see him somewhere in the 260s.
All right, very good. Josh Allen, on the other hand, 280.5 passing yards is his more or less. He's hit this more in 8 of 17 games, including 352 against Miami last week. John, how do you feel about Josh Allen heading into this one?
I'm going to take the less here as well. I think that this one could end up being a bit of a defensive game, and I'd be more interested in Allen's fantasy prop or his rushing prop, because he is like Mr. Everything on that offense. But I think that there's a way in which the Bengals kind of, I really like their defensive coordinator, the game plans that he can scheme up, especially against star quarterbacks. I think that they're going to keep a lid on the Bills a little bit, and specifically on Allen through the air.
Nick?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think that's a really good breakdown by John. And I worry about the recklessness with Josh Allen too. It's like he's on one play, he's capable of throwing the ball 70 yards in the air on a perfect strike to Stephon Diggs. And then on the next, he's rolling out, he's holding the ball out there, it's getting stripped. Like I need the Bills to prove that they could play a clean game. And I think they're going to throw away a possession or two throughout this game because of that recklessness. So yeah, I think if you're looking at Josh Allen numbers on Monkey Knife Fight, I would look into the rushing yards. I would look into, the touchdown dance. I would look into the fantasy points. But yeah, this passing yard total, I'm staying far away.
25.5 fantasy points.
I like the more there. I like the more.
All right, very good. Let's fly through the skill position players here. Jamar Chase, John, 89.5 receiving yards, more or less.
I'm going to go with less here on this one. I think that, again, we're not going to see the most explosive aerial performance from the Bengals, and that they're deep. If Chase, obviously the number one option there, if he gets locked up a little bit by Tre'Davious White, then I think we see Higgins and Boyd more make the impact.
Nick, Stephon Diggs, 85.5 receiving yards.
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm going to go less. I think this Bengals defense, if you're talking about Cincinnati, it's usually about Burrow and Chase and Higgins and Mixon. Like, this has been a really, really good defense throughout this season. They've been the best defense in the league at halftime adjustments as well. So as long as they can prevent Stephon Diggs from going crazy in the first half, I think they're going to have something to contain that Buffalo offense in the second half. So I'll go less.
John, Joe Mixon, 52.5 rushing yards.
He's the key to the game, and I'm optimistic on the Bengals. I'm taking the more.
All right. Nick, anybody else in this game? Playoff Gabe Davis, maybe, that we should have our eye on?
Yeah, I mean, somebody's going to have to go off. I like T. Higgins, 64.5, the over on that, more than I do Jamar Chase. With John, I think Chase could certainly go more. I mean, he stepped up in the playoffs last year, went over that total pretty easily in 3 or 4 games, but I would rather basically go 20 yards down and get a guy who's almost as dangerous in T. Higgins. I'm on the complete other side with Joe Mixon. I really don't think Cincinnati is going to be able to run the ball in this game. I can't wait to do the pod with John later, and we can debate this for hours on end. But I like the less on Mixon.
All right. So the Bills have announced their Bills legend of the game, and Eric Moulds will be in the stands.
Oh.
Is the Bills legend of the game. Nick, do you have a favorite random Buffalo Bill from back in the day?
Peerless Price, baby. Say no more. It's Peerless Price. Or Lee Evans, of course, given his Wisconsin ties. But I was a huge Peerless Price guy in like 6th grade.
I always liked Travis Henry. He was always my guy. Travis Henry and Willis McGahee, that backfield was a lot of fun. John, what about you?
Let's see here. We got to get a split jersey to Keo Spikes. Half Bengals, half Bills.
There we go. Did Rudy Johnson play for both teams too? Did he
I always remember Rudy Johnson as the full name on the back of the jersey guy. I don't know if he played for the Bills. I'll get you an answer on that.
I feel like there's got to be like a running back or someone that might have played for. Ryan Fitzpatrick played for both teams, right? Did he play for the Bills? Yeah, Kelly Holcomb maybe. No, he was the Browns. I don't think he ever made it to Cincy. Wrong, Ohio. Same team. I mean, same colors. Got to get those confused. Do you have a Rudy Johnson answer for us?
I got a Rudy Johnson update here. We're going to break into the show. We got breaking news. Rudy Johnson did not play for the Buffalo Bills. He played almost his entire career in Cincinnati and then had one really sad year for the Detroit Lions.
But I got to say, though, Peerless Price, totally with you. Like, one of the coolest guys in like, it was one of those things where when you're young and you see a guy who's dominant at college football, it's like, why isn't he the first pick overall in this draft? And then it's like, I suppose I can see why. And then Travis Henry, great call, really prolific on the field and off of it. Check his Wikipedia.
Absolutely.
Big time. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
All right. How about a pick in this one, guys? This spread is actually up to 5.5. The Bills are favored by almost a touchdown. John, what are you thinking?
I love the Bengals on this one, and personally, I am leveraged on the Bengals winning it all. So perhaps that's entering in, but I think that Burrow makes less mistakes than Allen. I think Allen, the turnovers could catch up to him in this particular setting. And, we're looking at another really good game here, but one in which, the Bills end up bowing out in the second round.
Nick?
I'm a huge wuss. It is what it is. So I'm going to once again hedge and say that the Cincinnati Bengals cover this number, but do not win the game. I think my official score prediction at Rotowire was 33-30 Buffalo Bills.
No, I'm taking Cincy. The Bills are just too reckless, too careless, too sloppy for me to pick them to advance here. And please, for the love of God, I'm taking the Bengals just because I don't want that neutral site championship game next week. Even though
I would go to that.
I was going to say, did you already buy tickets to that?
The group chat has already decided that we are going to go if it is ultimately down here in Atlanta.
Dude, you have to at the Algie Crumpler Dome, no question.
Yeah, you get an excuse to like pretend to be a Bills Mafia guy for a day, jump through a table, like.
Well, so the question on that is, if you do go, do you go in like neutral Ravens gear, or do you support either team? It's kind of like an NFL London game in some ways.
I feel like you wear a shirt that just says Atlanta. And just walk.
Go to the airport, get one of those gift shop shirts that just say Atlanta on it. I might wear something Georgia. I wouldn't wear the Ravens just out of shame for that one. I do have a Chiefs fan in my friend group down here, so I'm sure he'd be salty with it. But I think something chaotic neutral would be my move. Maybe a Bucky shirt.
There you go.
Yeah.
Very
like Miami Dolphins gear. Yeah, something like that.
There we go.
Very good. All right. Finally, Cowboys, Niners, the final game of the divisional round. Do the Cowboys have a right to be pissed about the rest going into this one? I already saw they were complaining a little bit because I kind of agree with them on this. I don't like the Monday night game in the wild card round. I think there should have been 3 games on Saturday and then 3 games on Sunday and just move on from there. I don't think we need to force an extra Monday night game onto the schedule here.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Like, as much as like me, the football fan, loves being able to taper off with one last game of the playoff round, I would be livid if it was the Ravens or something like that. Even though you're playing the latest possible game in divisional round weekend, you still are at a distinct disadvantage. Whereas the Niners will have had a full week plus to get ready for this one. So I think that the gripe is legitimate. I think the NFL, as much as I love the entertainment factor of the Monday night playoff game, Competitively, I think it puts that other team at a distinct disadvantage.
I feel the same way. I normally, when teams kind of quibble about stuff like this, I just say like, well, it's part of the schedule. But I mean, this is like a legitimate 2.5 day difference, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Monday night versus the first game on Saturday. That's a big deal. That's a very big deal. The Jaguars kind of came out on the wrong end of one of those, with how the Week 18 game worked out against Tennessee. When it's only one day, you just kind of charge it to the game. That's just how the schedule works. But yeah, I mean, Monday night versus early Saturday afternoon, that is a big difference. So nothing's going to happen, but I think Dallas is actually, kind of within their rights here to at least bring it up.
All right, Nick. Dak Prescott, 259.5 passing yards. This is more or less. He hit this number in 7 of 13 games this season. He had 305 yards and 4 touchdowns against that pitiful Tampa Bay Buccaneers team last week. What do we see out of Dak?
I actually really like the more here because I think no matter what you think happens in this game, the script would imply that he goes more. Like if you think Dallas plays a really great game and either wins outright or pushes the Niners to the brink, that means that Dak is probably playing really well, much like we saw last week. I think all things considered, that game on Monday night was the best Dak has played all season, especially with all the pressure and 7 straight games with a turnover. He played clean, and will he be able to do that against San Francisco? We'll see. I mean, it's a completely different animal going up against that secondary, that pass rush. I'm not convinced, but even if things go south early on and Dallas is down 17-3 at halftime, what are they going to do in the second half? They're going to be passing their way to try to get back into the game. So I think kind of no matter which way you game it out, there's a pretty decent case for Dak to go more here.
John?
I like the more here as well. He played extremely well against Tampa on Monday night. That easily his best playoff performance as well, I would say. And that had kind of been a knock on him going into the week. And like Nick said, like the game script, it would imply one way or the other that he's going to be, the game is in his hands essentially for Dallas. And you got to love the fact that there are some good like yards after the catch guys like a Tony Pollard that he can dump it down to and pick up some yardage to kind of like pad things, help him get to this number. So I like the more.
I like the more as well. Geno Smith just threw for 253 against San Fran. I think Dak can get 7 more yards than Geno Smith did last week. Brock Purdy on the other side, 250.5 for Mr. Irrelevant. Career high, 332 yards against the Seahawks last week. Just the second time he's thrown for 250 in his very short NFL career. Dallas does have a top 10 pass defense, but Tom Brady played a terrible game Monday night and finished with 351. When I saw that in the box score, I was absolutely shocked. Can Brock Purdy get to 251, John?
I don't think so because, whereas Brady, if it doesn't go well for him, he can still put up those numbers because the Buccaneers simply cannot run the ball. The Niners, they simply can. You got Christian McCaffrey, you got Elijah Mitchell. That's a powerful combo. Like if Purdy isn't really cooking in this one, then the Niners can kind of check things and go to the ground, and I think they can do it well against that Cowboys run defense. And I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of limit the exposure for Purdy in this one. There's some dangerous kind of playmakers in that Dallas secondary, and I don't think that we're going to see like the Deebo Samuel running away from everybody a couple times like we did a week ago. So I'm taking less here.
Nick?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. John hit on a lot of the points that I was going to make. So for one, you see the gaudy total last week. I mean, if you just take out the Deebo Samuel yak yards, which I get it, they count, but Deebo Samuel, he's a 1 of 1. Like, I mean, that was like 80 yards after the catch that you can't necessarily count on being there against a better defense. And also, like John said, this is a very opportunistic and, kind of turnover forcing Cowboys defense. Like they do allow a decent amount of yards. They're better against the run than they are against the pass. If you look at a lot of the metrics, but they have guys who are out there solely to get interceptions. Like that's what Trayvon Diggs' entire game is at this point. So I think the Niners know that. I think they do want to, I wouldn't say play it safe necessarily with Purdy, but they don't want to put him in situations where he's airing the ball out 45 times in this game. So unless things get away from San Francisco and they are playing from behind, which I think we could all agree is rather unlikely, I think John's on the right path here. I'll go less as well.
All right, let's fly through the skill positions here. John, CeeDee Lamb, 80.5 receiving yards, more or less.
I'll take the more.
Nick, George Kittle, 45.5 receiving yards.
More, baby. We're going more.
All right, John, Dalton Schultz, 49.5 receiving yards.
I'm going less here. Maybe he scores a touchdown. I would like him for the touchdown dance, but yardage, I don't think he's that guy.
Nick, CMC, 75.5 rushing yards, 21.5 fantasy points.
Man, I'll go less on the rushing yards, more on the fantasy points. I think they get him involved as a pass catcher.
John, Tony Pollard, 14.5 fantasy points.
80 some yards and a touchdown. He can get there. Yes, more.
All right. And finally, Deebo Samuel, Nick, 58.5 receiving yards, more or less.
I think statistically we got to go less here. I love Deebo. He might be my favorite player in the entire league, non-Jags division. But I think some people are going to get suckered into this one after seeing the big yardage total last week. For the most part, Deebo's gone under this total in most games this season.
All right, final question on this one, guys. Does Brett Maher make all of his kicks Sunday?
No.
Oh man, I hope for his sake he does. That was pretty tough. It was hilarious, but it was a little tough. And now that we're a couple days past it, I hope he makes them all. Probably not though.
All right, very good. John, the Niners, they're favored by 4 points. Do they cover?
That struck me as the low line of the weekend. I would have figured that was like creeping closer to 6. So I was surprised to see that. So it's 4. I think I'm gonna go with the Cowboys.
Did the Cowboys win?
No. So that's my hedge bet.
All right, very good, Nick.
That was John's wuss bet of the week, I guess, presented by Nick Whalen and the Jacksonville Jaguars. I've seen it at 3.5, 4, depending where you look. I like the Niners here. I get the case for the Cowboys. They surprised me by how well they played against Tampa Bay. I thought they would win that game. I didn't think they would dominate it in the way that they did. So I kind of understand it, but I also think John is right that my first instinct is, oh wow, this is only 3.5 or 4. So to me, usually when that happens, I want to take the other side of that. So I will kind of say the pendulum swings back a little bit for Dallas, and they end up losing this game and are unable to cover.
Yeah, give me San Fran. You know the Mike McCarthy screw-up's coming. It's coming this week.
Yeah, he's been riding a little too hot.
Give me the Niners, 27-20, your final. All right. That's going to do it for us this week. Thank you for watching, everyone. Don't forget to hit subscribe on our YouTube page at Monkey Knife Fight. Good luck in your contest this week, and we'll talk to you next week for Championship Sunday.